What do you read into the events in the Arab world right now?
I see an expression of radicalism in the form of attacking embassies and killing ambassadors and expressing these violent traits in the radical ways of thinking that proliferated in the last few decades in the Muslim world, is expressing itself in this form, as it expresses itself also in Afghanistan in beheading people. But this is different kind of violence. It's based on the same thinking trait of accepting using violence to suppress the others and prevent them from saying their opinion, or prevent them from saying things that you perceive as insulting.
Well, why do you think this is happening, especially in countries that have gone through transition or still going through transition?
There are general underlying causes, like some principles, for example, religious principles that whoever say a bad word against Prophet Muhammad must be killed, which is not in the Quran, but it's one of the mainstream beliefs in some Islamic books. And also the excessive love to Prophet Muhammad makes many Muslims feel that any insult to him, they have the responsibility to defend him, especially according to Islamic traditional teaching that the sinners will go to hell first, and the Prophet Muhammad is the one who will do intercession or shafa'ah to bring them out from hell to paradise. It's not God who will do this, it's Muhammad intercession. So there is an excessive emotional feeling toward the Prophet Muhammad because of this. So these are underlying factors, but we can say there are localizing factors that happened in Egypt, for example. In Egypt, you have a role model of Issam Sharaf, for example, the former prime minister, or one of the early prime ministers after the revolution, who actually celebrated the young man who took the flag of the Israeli embassy and burned it and destroyed it with the mobs surrounding the embassy. So instead of punishing him and considering him a criminal for doing such act of attacking the Israeli embassy, they actually celebrated him in the media and by the prime minister. So you are giving a very bad role model here. In Libya, the situation is different. You have many radicals who have military power in their hands, who are well trained, who can take decisions to attack the embassy based on the movie or based on some arrangement.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this. A lot of people are saying, U.S. officials even, that this was a pre-planned attack, that the film may not have anything to do with this. Do you agree to this?
It is a possibility. I cannot just take it out of the possibilities. It's one of the possibilities. But also the possibility that the movie incited excessive hatred and violent desire to use violence against the U.S. Could be really implemented easily, because you have fighters who are well trained and have weapons, heavy artillery in their hands. So it's not that difficult if you are well trained for more than a year fighting al-Qaddafi and well trained on the use of this military, to really take these weapons into your hands and go attack the embassy. So both possibilities are valid.
But
until
the groups that you're talking about are the groups that were funded by the U.S., trained by the U.S. in some cases during the revolution in Libya. Do you think that the U.S. didn't see this coming, especially after what happened in Afghanistan back in the 70s and the 80s, and now we see the results with the Taliban?
I think people do not learn from history very well. That's one of the problems of humans. They don't learn from history, and they follow advice without really going into enough depth of understanding the culture, as we talked about, the mindset, the religious things. And some of these radicals were probably supported by the NATO, and some radicals may probably have access to the weapons, because when al-Qaddafi and the government collapsed and the whole system collapsed, they had easy access actually to a lot of weapons. So certainly there is a big problem here in dealing with the Middle Eastern issue. Do you
think the U.S. expected the democracy that they were promising the Libyans, the Egyptians, and all the other countries, the nations in the Arab world, that this will be the result of the democracy that they're promising?
Obviously not. You see Hillary Clinton, for example, clearly saying that how can this happen in a country that that we helped them to get freedom. So they are really shocked, and it's painful. It's painful. The Americans and NATO helped them, expecting that they will reciprocate this at least by showing some values of liberty and respect for others, and at least respect for America. But they underestimated the threat of radical Islam. As what happened in Iraq, they underestimated the threat of radical Islam. And the main factor in this threat is the ideology. If you don't deal with this ideology, you can't win this game. If you focused on the two things, what's commonly said here is military power or democracy. These are the two things. It's like someone who knows how to change the tire of the car, and he thinks that fixing complex electronics thing in the car can be done via changing the tires. No, it will not. You need to go into a completely different dimension here. That is to deal with an ideology. It's a religious ideology, whatever they want to admit it or not. It is a religious ideology, and we have to deal with it.
Especially because a lot of people were telling the U.S. before, we're talking about the fact that there are Al-Qaeda elements. In your articles, you do talk about this.
I'm one of these people who clearly stated that if you want to implement a democracy, avoid sudden democracy syndrome. It will bring the Islamists to power, and we will suffer.
Would you say that the U.S. just simply does not understand the nature of the Arab world, the fact that they want to impose democracy, that is completely a failure right now, a lot of people would say?
There are people who understand, people who do not understand, and depends on the balance of powers in certain time in history the decisions are taken. And unfortunately, the decisions here, I don't think they were like very, very, very correct. I don't think so.
Do you think that the U.S. will change its strategy in the Arab world, in countries that are going through transitions right now, based on in light of what's going on now?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, for example, there will be many voices who will start questioning if removing al-Assad, for example, is a good idea or not, because supporting the rebels can ultimately bring extremely radical people who will ultimately attack America and become enemies to America. So it doesn't work the way people think. I think the Libyan example of killing the ambassador in such way, and the spread of the reaction in several Islamic societies that had revolutions, will make many people think twice before supporting the rebels against al-Assad. I think it will, I can't say it will be a game changer with this respect, but I can say it will make many people think twice about this issue of supporting the rebels against al-Assad.
Think twice, but will they actually take decisions that are different than their decisions before? Or will they maybe reconsider this strategy and think of a different approach?
Likely, I may put a possibility of 60% possibility that decisions may have some changes or modifications. Especially now Al-Akhdar Ibrahimi is trying to solve the problem, so the Syrian issue is hot. I know it was a policy to remove al-Assad, but I think with the Libyan issue, it will make the voices of the people who were against the removal of al-Assad more prominent and more heard. But it's very hard to guarantee the outcome, because it depends on different variables, different powers, the ultimate intentions of. So it's not something that you can easily say it will make change or not. But
how do you see the relations between the U.S. and the countries that are going through transition, particularly Libya and Egypt, especially after the latest protests?
It will certainly create a new way of thinking in the relation with these people. And I think it will affect, for example, the donations that might go to Egypt. The Congress is supposed to allow $1 billion donations to support Egypt. I believe many people in the Congress will start to think twice about if this is appropriate without having guarantees from Morsi that he will really respect the values of democracy. The problem here is that many societies understand democracy just as a ballot, and the West understand democracy as transparency, freedom of speech, respect for minority. So there is completely different understanding of the same word. We here in the West understand it as these values, but in the other parts of the world, they understand it as the majority suppress minority and dominate everything.
But if the Congress is going to reconsider its aid, for instance, to Egypt, and put conditions, maybe, that's another form of conditions that the Arab world is sick of, is tired of, and that's one of the reasons that they're protesting the hegemony of the West over their countries.
I think you have the full right, really, if you are giving donations, you have the full right to put conditions, because it's extremely unwise to give someone donations and at the end he will promote an ideology of hatred to you or that can ultimately cause you damage. So I think it's fair to say that if I'm giving someone donations at that big level, it's fair that the U.S. insists on certain conditions.
Would you say the U.S. will start on working on its relations with the Arab world, with the peoples, not with the governments, because they have seen where that is going?
Yeah, I think they will become more aware of that the ideology of radicalism has to be fought. They cannot just ignore it. The problem is not simply military solutions or using democracy to solve the problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Pleasure.